everybody, and welcome back to SA Smart Chats, part of the Mayor's K-12 Smart City Challenge. I'm Dr. Natasha Wilkerson, and today's focus is on the topic of digital equity and the digital divide, just one of the possible topics you can choose for the 2025 challenge. So as a reminder, your goal is to figure out a strategy, product, or service that improves the quality of life for San Antonio area residents. So to help us better understand this topic, we're going to talk with Charles Woodin, CEO of Geekdom. Welcome, Charles, to SA Smart Chats.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so students may or may not be familiar with Geekdom. It's an amazing organization here in San Antonio. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do?
For sure. So Geekdom is a accelerator and incubator in downtown San Antonio. We also have a co-working space. And what we do is really helping any individual across the city find, or if they have an idea, find a way to take that idea and create it into reality. Make a company out of it, create a product out of it. No matter what that is, our goal is to help guide them through what we're calling the entrepreneurial journey. Everybody has an idea in the back of their mind that they think could revolutionize something that they do, something that frustrates them. And our job is to make sure that that happens. Our goal is to launch the next 500 startups, with 75% of them calling San Antonio home. And our mission is to build San Antonio one entrepreneur at a time. We love working with kids, helping them really understand how to approach different markets and what their ideas could turn into in regards to products and services. So I'm very happy to be talking to you today.
I love it. So before we get into this topic, as a bigger picture of this competition, it's such a massive topic this year because there's so many angles, right? So they're thinking about quality of life, and today we're going to talk about this digital equity, which is one piece. But what I've noticed students struggle with is defining the problem. So do you have any tips? So as like an entrepreneur, they need to come up with an idea, but how do you even get started?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Defining the problem or what question to ask to help define that is where it all begins. And so, in regards to this question in general, as I thought about this conversation, when you think about digital equity, that is something which means how do we create a level playing field for individuals as they engage with digital tools and how they engage in a digital world? That can be in several different ways. And so, that's how I look at it. And the way that I define it is how do we help individuals, no matter what age they are, understand how to utilize the current technologies that are available and how to leverage them for their benefit, but also how to be aware of how they could be used against an individual for their own detriment. So I think that there's a couple different ways that you could look at that approach, and you could look at it as access to the internet, access to computers and phones, or just understanding the different technologies that are on those different types of platforms. And yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I hope that that's helpful.
So how does a student think about solutions to that problem? Are there already initiatives in San Antonio on trying to support the digital divide or increasing digital equity?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different approaches on how people can or address those challenges. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of those is, specifically during COVID, I know there was a large push for us to be able to get access to the internet for anybody who was stuck at their house at that time. If they were only able to access the internet, whether it was at school, at work, or at a library, we needed to really solve that. So that the way that we addressed it, and I say we as a city at that moment, was really finding tools to be able to give people Wi-Fi, whether that was, working with internet service providers or getting different mobile units to these individuals so they can gain access to the internet. I think another way that you can look at it is, giving devices to individuals, whether they be computers or mobile devices, so that people can have access to that if they can't afford it, whether or not they know where to begin educating them on that. And another way that I've seen the city approach it, and I think the organization has changed its name, but it used to be called Oats, and it really focused on helping individuals in the elderly ages, a little bit older, understand how to utilize technology because they're relatively familiar with it. And so how do we help them understand how to use a computer, how to get on to different social medias, how to use platforms on the internet to be able to gain access to their different resources?
And we're now in this era of AI. And I'm sure students have tried out ChatGPT to, get their homework done or something. So how is AI going to be part of this conversation?
It has evolved so much in just these last 2 years. That generative AI switch. I mean, AI has been something that people have been talking about now for a couple decades at the very least. But just these last 2 years, with the advent of ChatGPT and how many other generative AI platforms have been created, it has really changed the game. How I've seen people be able to utilize it is just as you mentioned, being able to write a speech or do a paper very quickly. Also, you can utilize it to help surmise different ideas or different topics that you may not be familiar with. It can answer questions for you. There are so many different ways that it can be utilized that I still don't think that we've began to dig deep enough to get to the bottom of what it's capable of. I'll tell you, for our organization, as we work with entrepreneurs, we've used it in a lot of different ways to help them run research on their product or idea, maybe do some market research because it has the access to the whole internet, but you can also guide it and narrow that focus so that it's not as broad. And that is a very helpful tool for individuals to be able to put themselves in others' shoes and ask these different questions and get different perspectives. So I think it is an amazing advent that we have had the ability to just see real time over these past 2 years. And I think we're going to continue to see it advance over the next handful. But I think, looking at the frontier of an individual coming from middle or high school, it is exciting to be able to utilize a tool like that and then contemplate how that's going to evolve in the next handful of years as you're going through college or getting your first job. Those types of things I think are going to be really exciting.
And students should absolutely consider using it for this competition, right? Like use the resources that are available. So, how might students think about AI? So, if they're going to tackle, digital equity and they're trying to define the problem and maybe thinking about market research and then developing a pitch, any tips for those students?
I look at it as, the again, going back to where we started this conversation, how you ask the question and what the question is one of the most important pieces. And that is even more so, even more important when you're thinking about the prompts that you're putting into a chat GPT like model. They have this saying, trash in, trash out. And so if you're not asking a proper question, if you're not giving a proper prompt with all of the, I guess like guidelines and guardrails that you want to create around it, it could give you something that sounds really amazing, but is not where you want to head. So I look at it as, we all learned in school the who, what, when, where, how, and why. And if you apply those types of thoughts to your prompt, you can really advance that answer to be a lot more beneficial. So the way that I think about it is really contemplate what it is that you want the answer to. So giving an example around this digital equity, if I were to go to ChatGPT and give it a prompt, I would define what I think it is first, may even ask for ChatGPT to give me, alternative definitions so that I can help shape it. Maybe other, bring that in after you get that answer from ChatGPT, but then really start to think about, okay, who is my audience? Is it going to be San Antonio based individuals? Is it going to be youth, elderly, anybody? How are we going to help them gain access to it? What is it that we're actually focusing in on? Is it use of the platforms and the tools? Is it the devices themselves? Is it the access to the internet? Those are the different ways that I would think about how I approach the question and making
Yeah.
sure that I touch every one of those points before I hit enter on that first prompt. And then when you get that response, be very thoughtful with how you take that future step. So let's say the response is too broad. Hey, help me narrow this. Let's look at it from this lens or that lens, and just adjusting it. And then the great thing about things like Chat GPT, as long as you don't overutilize the free of data that you get, using that same thread can take you so deep, and you can continue to iterate on it throughout days, and you can continue to mold that idea. So I think it's a really great tool, and I hope that you all use it effectively. Don't rely on it too much. Obviously, people are a main piece of this, but it is something that can make you way more powerful than I was when I was going through school.
Right. And I think it's important to note that not everything is true. So
Yes.
still fact check. And I've noticed they now add links to sources. So click on those sources and make sure it's a legitimate source that is pulling information, because there's a lot of not great stuff out there, especially if you're thinking about market research. You need to go out and do your own market research. You can't ask ChatGPT, what are the statistics around this? It might give you some good references, but part of this competition is also going out and talking with people and trying to figure out the needs. And the other piece, as students are designing their ideas, is getting feedback from the users. So do you have any tips there? Because this idea of market research is really scary for kids. How should they approach it?
Yeah, I think that it's not only scary for kids. I'll illuminate that for you. We deal with adults all the time that are very apprehensive to walk out and ask somebody a question. The way that I look at it is, getting over that fear is step number one. You really need to just realize that talking to anybody is as simple as it is to talk to your best friend. You just have to meet them where they are. There is a local individual who works for the Spurs. Her name is Dr. Kara Allen, and she has this belief where she says you should get proximal with somebody, specifically when you're trying to understand where they're coming from. And I cannot stress that enough. I think that that's really important. So if you are, I feel the point that you just made, Dr. Wilkinson, is so important. You can't just rely on this technology, because if you do, you're only going to get one lens. You really need to go and meet people where they are. And when you do that, just do not make any assumptions, or do not let your assumptions form the shape of it. Ask the question, no matter how mundane it is, and really go with open-ended questions. You don't want to keep narrow questions. If you get to yes or no questions from the beginning, it's going to be very difficult to make a lot of progress. So really start asking them. And I'll give you an example. If you're coming up with an idea for a new backpack, just throwing out a crazy idea here, and you wanted to talk to somebody, who should you go and seek as somebody who wears backpacks a lot? I would go to students. I would go to them, and I would start with them and asking questions like, hey, what is the biggest challenge that you deal with your current backpack? What is something that you wish that you could fix on it? What is the thing that you like the most about it? Asking these types of questions, they are open-ended, but they are narrow enough that you're going to get some answers that help you realize the challenges and positive aspects of what the current solution has. So as you're starting to address what the new solution is, or what your approach is going to be, you have that understanding of what people are dealing with and what they like about it. And then you can start to expand on those.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. I think that will be very helpful. And knowing that adults are also nervous, maybe will help kids feel more confident. So I want to end here with a question about your story. So how did you end up in this role at Geekdom? What were you doing before this? And you're clearly very passionate about entrepreneurship and startups. Tell me more about you.
Well, I hope you add another 60 minutes to this interview, because it's going to take a long time. No, I'm just joking. I had a really interesting pathway to this, and it's very non-traditional. So, take that with, or take what I'm about to say with that understanding. I was born and raised just outside of Detroit, Michigan. Spent nearly my first 20 years of life up there, with the exception of 2 years that I spent in the Rio Grande Valley right after NAFTA was passed, and my father was setting up a factory in Reynosa. I One of the things that I realized while I was growing up in Michigan was that the city, if you know anything about Detroit and Flint, which was another city I lived next to, they were not cities that were really doing great in the couple decades that I was living there. This is through the 80s and the 90s, leading up to the early 2000s. I joined the military because I didn't really see a lot of opportunities in those cities at that time, unless I wanted to work for a car factory, manufacturing them. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I didn't see it in my backyard. And so I joined the military. I ended up becoming a Korean linguist, which has nothing to do with what I do now, but it was an exciting job. It was an exciting opportunity for me. I got to learn about a new culture, which is the Korean culture. I got to learn the language. And so I can say, random things like "Annyeonghaseyo, 제이름은 찰스입니다," which basically just says, "Hi, my name is Charles Woodin." But it was a really eye-opening experience for me to go through. I spent 8 years in the Air Force, flying around in one of the ugliest planes that they had in the inventory, and got to travel the world, meet new and diverse individuals. It was one of the most eye-opening experiences that I could have had, and I'm so grateful for that. But my last 2 years while I was in the military, I spent in Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas, so just a couple hours away from where we are today. And when I was there, I was an instructor. And one of the things that I fell in love with was I realized a couple different things about myself. Number one, I'm a person who loves to solve problems. And if you present me with a challenge or a puzzle, I will not stop until I've fixed it. And that's just something that is innate in me. And then when I was doing that job in particular as an instructor, I loved helping individuals solve their problems, number one, but number two, helping them transition through these major stages of their lives and helping them kind of see what's next and what's possible. And I loved being a part of that. But I kind of made my decision when I went to San Angelo that I was going to get out of the military after the next 2 years. And so I stayed on that path. I ended up moving down here to San Antonio, started to go to school at UTSA to pursue an engineering degree, but ended up finding a tangential pathway, which led me to Apple, the technology company, the computer company. And I always loved what they did. And I fell in love with that organization. And they gave me such great opportunity. And the opportunity that I fell in love with when I was there was what was called business consulting. And so I worked with small to medium sized businesses and how to utilize Apple technology and the apps that are on there to make their businesses more proficient. And so when you couple that with the idea that I love to solve problems, and now I have the ability to solve business problems for individuals, their companies, if they employ 50 people, this one challenge that I'm solving for them could affect all 50 of those people's lives. It also then could affect all the customers that these individuals touch as well, which meant that I had this really big feeling of my bucket internally whenever I would help these individuals solve their problems. So I loved it. I honestly never thought I would leave Apple because I knew the company, the culture. I loved what I was doing. But then one fateful day, I had a former boss of mine at Apple who was the COO here at Geekdom, and he asked me to come down and check this place out. And I really had no idea what Geekdom was doing. But when I walked in that day, 99% sure that I was going to say no to whatever opportunity was asked of me then, I was really informed about what Geekdom's mission was. Here, this organization is intended to help entrepreneurs form their ideas and create businesses out of them. That's amazing. And you think about going back to those problems solved, these solutions that come out of these four walls that I'm sitting in have the potential of affecting millions of individuals' lives over the time because these are brand new ideas, brand new companies. But the other aspect of it that really spoke to me was Geekdom's role with trying to define and give purpose to downtown San Antonio and bringing me all the way back to my hometown of Detroit. During those 2 decades, there was not something like Geekdom at that time. And I feel like something like that would have really helped change the trajectory of Detroit. And being a part of that here in my new hometown of San Antonio meant the world to me. I'm raising my kids here, and I want to make sure that San Antonio has opportunities for them so that when they get to be my age, when I join the military, I want them to be able to see themselves here. I want them to be able to see themselves contributing to this ecosystem and growing the benefits and possibilities for others. It is such an amazing city to be a part of, and I want everybody else to see and feel that. And I'm so happy that I get to contribute to it through the work that we do here at Geekdom and affecting people's lives. And I think as these, I've been here now for 7 years, over 7 years. I've been CEO for the past 5.5 years, and it has been one of the most rewarding jobs. And I hope that I continue to do this and we help, the next 500 startups, really get formed. And I hope that every one of those has an effect on hundreds of individuals' lives, and that we can really count and quantify that in a meaningful way.
Wow, that was incredible. Well, first off, say I didn't know where the story was going. There were so many
I'm a
twisted turns
weaver. I'm
in your
sorry.
story. No, I love it. And I think that's such a great story for students to hear who may think they need to think right now, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor, know exactly what they want to do. And most students don't. So it's all part of that journey of kind of figuring out where you want to have your impact. And I think with SA Smart, we're trying to build that entrepreneurial mindset of giving back and improving our city with these ideas. And it starts with kids. And maybe they will come to Geekdom in a few years with their big pitch and be part of those 500 startups that you're on a mission for. So I want to appreciate your time, Charles, for joining me here on SA Smart Chats.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.